Ryan Reynolds here for, I guess, my 100th Mint commercial. No, don't. No. I mean, honestly, when I started this, I thought I only have to do like 4 of these. I mean, it's unlimited premium wireless for $15 a month. How are there still people paying 2 or 3 times that much? I'm sorry, I shouldn't be victim blaming here. Give it a try at mintmobile.com/save. Whenever you're ready.
$45 upfront payment equivalent to $15 per month. New customers on first 3-month plan only. Taxes and fees extra. Speed slower above 40 gigabytes. See details.
The following is an exclusive presentation of News Radio KMAN, your home for K-State athletics. It's game time. This is The Game on News Radio KMAN.
Robert Lipson has talked me into moving the time on my clock to military time. He says from here on out on Robert's World on PowerCat Game Day, it is we're going only military time from here on out.
Okay, then.
So the game at Bill Snyder Family Stadium on Friday kicks off at 1900. PowerCat Game Day at 1500 here on K-Man and also on our sister station 101.5 K-Rock. Welcome to the game. Mitch Fortner, Trey Coverdale, and AJ Shaw. And AJ, I'm a little surprised you didn't play a particular intro today.
Yeah.
I'm sorry?
He wasn't going to do it for himself.
He's not going to pull the Troy. Actually, he is trying to pull a Troy.
Yeah, something like that.
Today is AJ Shaw's 23rd birthday. Happy birthday.
Thank you, Mitch. I appreciate it. And I appreciate Troy with the birthday shout-out this morning on the morning show. Thank you very much for that, sir. I wasn't going to play the birthday theme for myself because...
Because of what today is?
No, because that would be incredibly cocky, wouldn't it?
Well, it's 9/11.
That's also true.
Yeah. And you were born on September 11th, 2001.
Uh-huh.
Which is still wild to me. I figured even births stood still after that took place. Nobody had kids on 9/11 because who's gonna deliver that kid? Everybody was watching TVs.
Well, they were able to do it.
Do you know what time you were born?
Yeah, 8:16 at night.
Okay, so still crazy though. If we have time at the end of this first hour, I want to hear any stories you have.
Okay.
From that day.
Okay.
23 years ago today.
9/11
attacks and A.J. Shaw was born. Coming up on today's show, we'll at 4:40. Go ahead and text right now if you haven't yet. Text CATS to 785-537-1350 if you want a chance to win a pair of K-State football tickets for this Friday against Arizona. They are reserved seats. They're not GA or anything. Reserved seats. You'll have to play a little game of KSU or U of A at 4:40 to win those tickets. Get 2 of the 3 questions right, and you are a winner. But to play, text CATS, 785-537-1350, and we will be drawing a random number to call. That person doesn't pick up, we go to the next call, so on and so forth. It's Wednesday, and you know what that means. AEW Dynamite tonight on AJ's birthday. How about that? He's got some dynamite on his birthday from Rupp Arena in Lexington, Kentucky.
Really?
It also means we're joined by, this week, Drew Galloway from K-State Online. Drew, welcome back to the game. 9/11, how old were you when that took place?
I was almost 3 years old, so I don't really remember anything, to be completely honest.
So, okay, then that makes you 8 years younger than me. So you would have graduated high school, 6, 7 years ago?
Yeah, I graduated high school in 2017.
How much was 9/11 taught to you? I'm curious about that. Maybe those of AJ's age or your age, Drew, or even younger. Is that now being taught in schools like maybe the Kennedy assassination or Lincoln assassination is talked about?
Yeah, it's especially talked about on 9/11. I think that in history class in middle school, high school, we talked about everything that went on, watched a documentary about it. But it's kind of you don't really think about it or hear about it until it's time. Like when it is 9/11, like that's like when you really kind of got to learn about it, and like learn about all of like how it all kind of happened and everybody's reaction to it. Because I mean, you got to think too that like my generation was kind of the first one to come up with like the technology and everything. So kind of hearing about how everybody heard about it was also like super fascinating.
I mean, either you by watching TV, listening to the radio, or somebody called you. That's basically it. That's how you found out, word of mouth, or you were watching TV or listening to the radio. Because I was in fifth grade at the time, and I've told this story many times, but I lived just 2 houses away from the grade school I was going to. And I remember watching the second plane go into the second tower live on TV, watching CBS. And then I go to school. Everybody's been either on buses or they've been in their cars. And they're at school with no internet. There's no TVs. Nobody knew about it until I went to school and started talking about it. And it still wasn't until the next day that we took time out of school to talk about what happened the day before with 9/11 on the terrorist attack. So, I mean, that's crazy to look back and think the lack of resources we had and how a fifth grader who walked to school was the only person that knew about it. At least, as far as I understood, I was the only one that knew about it because, heck, half the people there didn't even know what the World Trade Center was. All right, you made the trip out to New Orleans. First of all, how long was that drive?
It was 15 hours one way. So we were in the car for 30 hours over the course of the weekend.
All right, so give me the takeaways. When you're jumping back into the car, the game is over, you're jumping back into the car, you're getting ready to leave and go back home. What were the main things you were talking about with the rest of the crew?
I think it was just kind of talking about how we didn't expect K-State to really struggle in the secondary, not just in the game Saturday, but kind of just in general. Like that was a position that I had pointed out during the offseason of, okay, this is like probably going to be the strength of the team will be safeties and corners. And you kind of saw them get exposed a little bit. And it just sounds like that it was some eye discipline things. And I think that some too has to do a little bit with when you have that much experience, you feel like you can do a lot more. So I think that having like half of the field play man and half of the field play zone is probably something that K-State thought that they could do because they have so much experience back there. But kind of seeing that you probably weren't able to do that, it's probably better that it happened against Tulane than say like tomorrow or Friday night against Arizona.
What about the rest of the defense? And what's your takeaway from just stopping the run, also stopping the pass, the tackles for loss? I mean, you got to kind of throw, if you were just to throw the defense into one big group, where's this team at right now?
If you throw the defense into one big group, I think that it's just in that like mid-tier level. I think that the linebackers were pretty good against Tulane. Austin Romaine obviously is one of the big standouts, but Austin Moore also played really well. And then Desmond Purnell is just steady Eddie at linebacker. Defensive line left a little bit to be desired. They were pretty good stopping the run, but part of the problem that they had against Tulane and kind of led to some of the coverage lapses was that Mensa had a lot of time to throw until the second half when K-State decided to just go guns blazing and sent 5, 6, 7 players at a time on some plays. So the defensive line kind of took a little bit of a step back compared to the UT Martin game. But all in all, it is better when you can play a clunker and win than if they played like that and lost. And you saw across the country, Penn State played pretty poorly and still came out on top. Oregon played poorly for the second week in a row, but they keep winning. KU played a clunker against Illinois and lost. So it can always be worse, but they can't probably afford to play like that again. And Chris Kleiman said that on Monday, that's probably as poor of defense that K-State can play and still win the game.
There's a lot of good teams that are 2-0 right now that probably feel like, boy, if you were to combine, the optimism heading forward for those teams like in Oklahoma, for example, who just struggled to score any points against Houston. They're probably not feeling too good with a tough SEC schedule. Yes, for K-State, it hasn't been pretty. It hasn't looked good a lot of the time, but they figured it out. It's much different to struggle a little bit and be 1-1 compared to 2-0. It's a major difference than if K-State lost that game to Tulane. We'll touch more on the defense here in a second because I have more questions that'll fit that into that secondary and their struggles against Tulane. I want to touch on Avery Johnson. He's played 2 games. I thought he was better in the game against Tulane. He's been a part like everything else where this team has just been a second-half team. But what's been your assessment of Avery Johnson through 2 games?
Yeah, I think that there is a little bit to say that he has struggled a little bit in the first halves, and it's something that K-State has really talked about and has started to want to address. And I think that it's not just a first half thing. K-State has really struggled on first downs to kind of start drives. So if they can figure that out, and I talked with Scott Wildcat on Bosco's Boys about this that will drop tomorrow, that the offense is like 1 or 2 plays away from, I think, everybody feeling pretty good about where they are all in all. Like you look last week, it is the Sterling Lockett play near the end of the half. Sterling Lockett probably scores if that's a better ball from Avery Johnson. There was another one where it was a pass to Jaden Jackson where Avery Johnson just overthrew him by about a step. There was a stretch run on a 2nd and 13 play that K-State ended up kicking a field goal on the first or second drive, where DJ Giddens has a lane, but Garrett Oakley doesn't sustain the block. So you get kind of all of that, and you make the bigger play, and I think that everybody feels pretty good. And you even had that in the UT Martin game where there were a couple plays where you maybe get a little bit better of a pass, or you catch the ball, or you sustain a block better, and I think that everybody feels better about the offense. So I don't think that it's entirely play calling as much necessarily as it is execution. I think that's something that will come around because you have to remember that a lot of these guys on the offense, outside of DJ Giddens, it's really their first time being a full-time starter.
A reminder, if you want to win tickets to K-State football against Arizona, we're going to be playing some KSU or U of A at 4:40. Text CATS to 785-537-1350 and have your opportunity to win those tickets. You got to be able to pick them up by Friday at 5 p.m. That's when we're closing the doors to pick up those tickets. And one more segment with Drew is coming up next. We got to touch on the biggest threat from the opponent on Friday. That is Tetaroa McMillan, who's the second leading receiver in college football right now, despite just 11 yards against Northern Arizona. How the K-State secondary will fare against him, and more to come with Drew when we come back. You're listening to The Game.
This poor man is crying. Why? He missed the game. You know, you can always check out The Game podcast on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, and at newsradiokman.com.
We're back on The Game. Mitch Fortner, Trey Coverdale, and A.J. Shaw. I'm giving away 2 tickets to K-State football against Arizona on Friday. The game is on Friday. I'm giving away the tickets in a few moments at around 4:40. Your chance to play KSU or U of A. If you want to be a contestant on this thrilling game show, text CATS to 785-537-1350. And I've said this before, this text line is really cool because with all these texts flooding in to play this game, I'm seeing area codes from all over the country, and it's really cool to see where people are listening, so that's a lot of fun. We're back with Drew Galloway from K-State Online. Drew, welcome back to the show. Let's continue to talk about K-State. Now, just kind of focused on what's ahead, and that's Arizona, a tough opponent, 2-0, ranked 20th in the nation. We know K-State struggled against Tulane again in the passing game defensively, but also offensively for K-State. Yes, the offense just has to be all around better. The rushing games, though, have been pretty solid. We've seen a lack of Dylan Edwards in the receiving game with the wide receivers. Hasn't been what it probably should be so far, but again, the offense just needs to get better as a whole. So I'll ask you this. Moving forward into this game against Arizona, are you more concerned about the wide receivers or the secondary?
I would say that I'm probably more worried about the secondary. I think that Arizona has gotten off to not the best start defensively, and specifically against the pass. So I think that K-State can do some things to really exploit that in the passing game. But the secondary really concerns me when you look at McMillan and you look at Fafita is a really, really good quarterback as well. So from that standpoint, I think that I would lean more towards the secondary. Just with, I think that Teteroa McMillan is going to run away with the Biletnikoff Award at the end of the season. And he is one of the best receivers that K-State has played in a really, really long time. And he has all of the traits and all the tools that you would want anybody to have at receiver. He's 6'5". He can beat you deep. So I'd be more concerned about him specifically. So I would lean more towards the secondary.
I've been looking at the Arizona stats throughout today, kind of doing some prep on Arizona, getting ready for PowerCat Game Day on Friday, and I kind of see some similarities, really, numbers-wise, and what I feel like maybe the struggles are for both teams. Because if you look at Arizona and their receivers, it's like K-State. Like, yes, there's a wide receiver as your top guy right now. It's just way more for Arizona with Teteroa McMillan with 315, but he only had 11 yards against Northern Arizona. And then you have a running back and a tight end, and their next best wide receiver is 40 yards so far on the year. So there's really not a whole lot of depth showing up for Arizona either at wide receiver. Teteroa McMillan. Okay, I'm going to kind of put you on the spot here, Drew. I just thought of this question. I might even use this on PowerCat Game Day. This might be a tough one. Against the K-State secondary, I'm going to give you an over-under.
Oh, boy.
I'm thinking on the spot here. So, okay. I think his conference average last year was like $125. Let's add 10 to that. Over under receiving yards for Teteroa McMillan, I'll set it at 135.5.
I would say under. I think that K-State will figure some things out defensively to at least limit him and slow him down a little bit. I also think that there is something kind of to this game being Arizona's first road game with this new coaching staff. And you kind of might see them struggle a little bit. There's one thing that I also pointed out on Bosco's Boys recording as we did like a little bit of a preview for Arizona before we really dove in, was kind of just thinking about, you would see the Vegas line of 7.5, and that kind of leads me to think that Vegas wants everybody and the public to bet on Arizona, which means that this kind of feels like Vegas thinks that K-State is probably 2 scores better than Arizona and wants everybody to bet Arizona to cover that 7.5 number. So I think that there is probably something to that, and K-State might play well enough and stop McMillan enough that he is probably in that like 110 or below range.
Did you watch their game against Northern Arizona?
Yeah, I saw a little bit of the Northern Arizona game. We actually watched that in our hotel in Shreveport after we drove from New Orleans to Shreveport after the K-State game.
Because I watched a little bit of it, but I was also working on some other things, getting ready for the next week to roll around, get ahead of schedule a little bit. And, 2 catches for 11 yards. I'm a bit, is there something going on? Is Teteroa McMillan banged up? Was he sick? Was that talked about on the broadcast at all?
No, I think that there is probably something to his stat line. Kind of, you pointed it out that Arizona hasn't exactly thrown the ball well to other people. So you kind of wonder, were they just focusing on throwing to other people, kind of get other people more involved? But it was just a weird game. Like, Arizona didn't really struggle to move the ball. They struggled to score. And you kind of heard Joe Klanderman talk about that today. Is like, he didn't really think that Northern Arizona really did anything to slow Arizona down as much as Arizona kind of slowed themselves down with mistakes like penalties and turnovers. And you kind of look at that and you kind of think, okay, there's probably something to that, because you look at the stat line, like, that game shouldn't have been close. Like, Arizona dominated Northern Arizona in a lot of statistical categories outside of the score.
Interesting. I'm going to have to go back and watch some of that because I was a bit skeptic. I saw a few things, but I don't know. I just maybe thought he was banged up and it's not going in his direction a whole lot. More of a distraction, a decoy than anything. All right, a couple more questions for you, Drew. Let's go Big 12 for just a moment. We're 2 games in with everybody, right? Is there a Big 12 team that surprised you, one team that's disappointed you so far?
The one surprise I think would probably be Arizona State. Like I thought they were going to be very, very bad. So the fact that they have beat 2 teams that I'm not sure how great either Mississippi State or Wyoming are, but doing it in the relatively dominant fashion that Arizona State has done has really caught my eye. And then disappointing-wise, it has to be Texas Tech. Yep. I thought that Texas Tech schedule, kind of like Derek Young has pointed out, I think that we were both the first 2 really on it, that the schedule really set up for Texas Tech this season to make noise early on and be 5-0, 6-0, 6-1 to start the season. But starting the season against Abilene Christian and only winning 52-51 in a game that, if you ask Joey McGuire, he would probably say that they probably should have lost. And then getting boat raced by Washington State like they did makes me think that it could be a rough season in Lubbock. And that's a very talented team that really needs to figure some things out if they want to even track to make a bowl game, because the defense has been really, really bad in the first 2 weeks.
All right, Drew, to wrap up, I know you're really on top of K-State recruiting and keeping up with the visits. And the Friday game, right, could be pretty tough to get some recruits in to come visit and watch a game. But are you aware of any visits that we should mention for this game Friday?
Yeah, with a Friday game, it does make it a little harder to get visitors. But it's a pretty good crop of visitors. There are a few schools that play on Thursday locally, so K-State kind of gets the advantage there with inviting some Manhattan and Junction City and Lawrence Free State prospects to come to K-State. And then Sawyer Schilke, one of the 2025 commits, will be taking his official visit because I believe that he either has a bye week or plays on a Thursday. And then Logan Bartley from Florida is also taking an official visit because Florida started high school football so early that they actually have a bye week this week.
Huh. Interesting. Basketball has men's basketball. Tang has a visit this weekend, right?
Yes. Cam Ward from Washington, D.C., top 53 player in the country in the On3 industry ranking, will be in Manhattan this week. That kind of lines up with the Arizona game.
Well, Drew, you've become one of my favorite guests to bring on the show. Really appreciate your time. We'll see you at the Bill on Friday.
Yeah, thank you.
Drew Galloway from K-State Online joining us here on the game. And when we come back, boy, I just got these 2 tickets literally in my right hand right now that I want to give away. So, I mean, this is literally your last chance to text Cats to 785-537-1350 because here in 60 seconds, we are drawing a random number. AJ is going to be calling that number. If you don't pick up on the first call, we go to the next line. And you got to be able to pick up the tickets by 5 o'clock on Friday. Chance to win tickets and play KSU or U of A is next on the game.
Your home for K-State sports.
5 seconds left. Kavanaugh with a deep drop this time and lets it fly deep to the end zone. Lockett is in there. So are a bunch of blue shirts. And it is caught in the end zone by Anderson. Touchdown.
This is The Game on News Radio KMAN.
Ah, nice. Good song. Just went into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame a couple of years ago. We're back on the game. Mitch Fortner, Trey Coverdale, and AJ Shaw. It's time to play KSU or U of A. I'm giving away a pair of tickets right now to K-State, Arizona. We're joined by Paul from Manhattan. Paul, what are you up to today?
Just hanging out, enjoying a great day in Manhattan.
Right on. What do you typically do during the day? You got a big hobby or anything?
Well, I work for the university, so I'm
nice.
An instructor. I do some teaching.
Oh, what do you teach?
I teach interdisciplinary senior design in the College of Engineering.
Oh, wow. That is, I would have not been smart enough for that class. I can tell you right now. But, Paul, I think you're smart enough. You're going to get 2 of these questions right. You're going to win yourself a pair of tickets to the game on Saturday. If you don't know how this works, I have 3 questions. You need to get 2 right. Each question is 50-50. It's either KSU or U of A. Paul, are you ready to play?
Let's do it.
All right, Paul, here we go. Question number 1. We're also going to test the boys in studio as well because they all say they're super smart, especially the Shaw over here. This is like this is like Stump the Shaw deleted scenes right here. Okay. Oh boy. According to BetMGM, which team's quarterback currently has the better odds of winning the Heisman Trophy? These odds were updated on Sunday. Again, the question is, according to BetMGM, which team's quarterback currently has the better odds of winning the Heisman Trophy? Paul, is it KSU or U of A?
I got to go with Avery and KSU.
All right. AJ looks unsure. I think Troy would know because this is probably something he keeps up with every week. He's on the FanDuel. He's putting in his dollar bets. Did you put a dollar bet in on Avery before the season started?
I did not.
Oh, boy.
I actually did no futures this year.
All right, so according to BetMGM, which team's quarterback currently has the better odds of winning the Heisman Trophy? Paul says KSU. Is it KSU? Yes, it is. It is Avery Johnson, plus 3,000 right now, which is not in the top 10, but it's very close.
Okay.
Noah Fafita for Arizona, plus 4,000. According to BetMGM. So, Paul, one more question, and you are going to the game. So here we go. No pressure. You got a couple of chances to get it right. Question number 2. What college did movie maker John Hughes drop out of? KSU or U of A? Have you ever heard of John Hughes?
The name is familiar, but not in K-State circles, so I'm going to go with U of A.
Do you, AJ, John Hughes, are you
yeah,
familiar?
Of course. Yeah, he's a Chicago guy. Ferris Bueller's Day Off, The Breakfast Club.
Yep.
He was the quintessential 80s movies guy.
Yep.
So, yeah.
Home Alone.
Yeah, Home Alone.
He's Uncle Buck.
Yeah, Uncle Buck.
One of my favorite movies of all time he made. All right, for the tickets, Paul, is it U of A? Yes, it is.
Right.
What a win for Paul. Those were those easy questions, Paul? I was accused of giving too easy of questions in this game.
That was a little fast pitch softball.
Okay, that's well said. Boy, it was kind of tough to. I have a third question. It was a super easy one as well. We might as well just play it real quick. Which university has a rally cry, "Bear down" on its field?
Oh,
which I hate. I hate that they actually have well, okay, let's look at it this way. What if K-State put every man a Wildcat, very lightly onto the field? Would we be all right with that? You think we would be a fan of that? Maybe. I don't know. I think the bear down thing looks a little bit ridiculous. But anyway, Paul, congratulations. You won the tickets. Any idea who you're going to be taking to the game?
Well, I've got some family and friends. I'm gonna reach out to both of them and see who wants to go with me.
That's awesome. Well, Paul, congratulations. Hang on the line. AJ, the birthday boy, is going to pick up here in just a moment and get your information. So thanks for playing, and enjoy the game on Friday.
Thanks, guys. Go Cavs.
All right. Love it. Paul, Manhattan, representing, going to the game on Friday. Now, the real question is, did I give him the better seats, or did I give the winner on Tuesday the better seats? That's the big question.
You may get an angry text.
I'm going to bring that up on Powercat Game Day because John Hughes is arguably the best, movie maker of all time. He passed away. He also, Vacation, Christmas Vacation, European Vacation. He's also responsible for those movies.
Yep.
I mean, if you think of your all-time favorites, he had to make at least one of them.
I think the most interesting part about that is when you look at the breadth of stars that he worked with. and got them to fit into what his image for each of those movies was.
16 Candles, Pretty in Pink.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Molly Ringwald.
Yes. Chevy Chase in the vacation movies. I mean, let's be perfectly honest. Not exactly known for being an easy person to work with.
So what's your favorite John Hughes movie? Mine's Uncle Buck. Ferris Bueller's Day Off isn't. We actually talked about that the other day and about how Ferris was a horrible influence and a terrible person.
Yeah, I would probably have to go with The Breakfast Club.
That's a good one. Easily rewatchable.
Oh, yes, because it captures so much. Even if you look at the stuff and you feel like it's dated, it still captures too much of the teen experience for it to ever feel like it's truly dated.
All right, AJ, we're good? All right, congratulations again to Paul. He's going to the game on us. Enjoy the game, Paul. We'll take our last break of the hour. When we come back, we got to talk to the birthday boy. I want some 9/11/01 stories from the guy that was born on that day. That's coming up next. You're listening to the game.
Take me out to the ball game. Take me out to the game.
You, my friend, are in the game on News Radio KMAN.
At the game.
Bill, our traffic director, he's in charge of putting all the commercials in for our logs and stuff. Going to Vegas, and I just gave him a recommendation to go to the Zach Bagans Haunted Museum.
Nice.
Like every artifact in that museum is supposed to have a haunted attachment. I can't say the word. Attachment. There we go.
Along those lines, the Mob Museum.
The Mob Museum would be pretty cool.
Yeah.
There's also I love the Saw movies, the slasher,
Yes.
the traps and all that stuff,
Yes.
the games. And there's there's a Saw escape room in Vegas.
Oh gosh.
But it has like multiple levels to it, so I thought that would be pretty sweet. Anyway, back on the game, Mitch Fortner, Trey Coverdale, and AJ Shaw. Today is the 23rd anniversary of the 9/11 attacks and the day that AJ Shaw was born. So once again, AJ, happy birthday. I've always wanted to hear, because ever since I found that out, always been kind of wanting to know in-depth stories about what you know about that day and your mom giving birth literally 12 hours after the terrorist attacks took place.
Yeah, so I'm not going to get fully into how the whole how labor went for her. That's really not important and kind of disgusting. But my dad was on the phone while Mom was in labor. Was on the phone with my grandfather, rest in peace. And he goes, "Yeah, Mark, there was a plane that ran into the World Trade Center." And my dad goes, "Oh, was it kind of like," my dad's a history buff. He knows all these weird things about history. He goes, "Oh, was it kind of like similar to back in the 40s when a small plane flew into the Empire State Building?" And that was the assumption at the time. A lot of people didn't think it was a terrorist attack. Mm-hmm. Except my grandmother, who thought it was a terrorist attack immediately. I don't know if she was just saying that or she legitimately believed that. And he's watching it on TV while Mom is in labor. And the second plane hits, and he thinks he's watching a replay of the first plane hitting. Well, it was actually the second plane hitting.
Yeah.
And that's where everyone realized, oh, blank, this is not good. Well, at the time, Mom's trying to have a kid. She's trying to have this idiot over here. And the doctors are not paying attention to Mom and the baby trying to be born. They're paying attention to the
TV,
television.
yeah.
The television's on in the delivery room. So then they shut the hospital down. Everybody goes into lockdown. Everything's nuts. It's really just kind of craziness. Well, later that night, I finally decided to show up. And it's funny, I was actually supposed to be born on September 10th. But I guess I had to wait one more day. So when I was coming out, they tried to do it natural. Then they went C-section. Came out. Couldn't get my head out. My head was stuck. So they had to get like a vacuum cleaner or vacuum sucker to get my head out of Mom.
Okay.
And yeah.
thought you weren't going to go into the birth story.
I think the conversation with Mom the next time is going to be very interesting.
Hey, Jay, you didn't have to give all those details.
Yeah, well, AJ, they tell the story all the stinking time.
Well, I just picture it like you kind of went into it that the hospital shut down.
Yeah.
Nobody was paying attention to your mom. I just pictured every doctor, every nurse in that whole building not paying attention to any of the patients or obviously probably on every TV that was in that hospital had, so you could go into any room and see what was going on.
Yeah.
It was probably a major distraction, I would assume, and nobody was doing their job at the best of their ability.
No, they were not. And they did a good job at least getting me out, even though it took them a few seconds. And then Dad, who was just so overwhelmed with pride and manliness and like, this is my son. They give me to Dad. Dad starts walking away. Mom's sitting there all drugged up saying, hello, I'd like to see my kid. So they were able to chase down my dad, who my mom to this day says was just a complete disaster, was not helpful that day.
Well, I had to get you to do a TV so we could see what was going on.
Yeah.
He wanted to go out to the waiting area and hold him aloft like Simba.
Were you born in Chicago?
No, I was born in a town called Highland Park, Illinois.
Oh, okay. So, like, how far outside of Chicago is that?
It's like 30 miles.
Well, I mean, you think of all every airport was grounded, right? Well,
Yep.
O'Hare is
Yeah.
like one of the biggest airports in the world.
At the time, what is now called the Willis Tower, then called Sears Tower, that was shut down and evacuated. But yeah, it was definitely an interesting day, and I will give my parents credit with this. And I'm being serious when I say this. They definitely told me early on, like, hey, your birthday is a little bit different than other people's birthdays because of the significance of that day. So I learned pretty early on just kind of the importance of it and to kind of just reflect on what happened on this day, and that even though it was a tragedy for many, and we obviously send our thoughts to those families, still definitely a joy for our family.
Boy, what an interesting conversation to have with your child.
Yeah.
You're probably obviously one of the very few that was born on that day.
Yeah.
I've never met anybody else that was born on that day. Mm-hmm. But let's wrap up hour number one. We got a short hour two. We got the Royals coming up at 5:30. Probably had to be pretty selective of what was on the TV on, birthday parties. Or just not have it at the house. Go somewhere public.
It is what it is. At least it's important.
All right, let's get out of here. Hour two of the game coming up next. I got to step out. These guys take it over the rest of the way. You're listening to the game on News Radio KMAN.
So I can go see Colby play at K-Dub. I'm ecstatic about playing on Friday night. But that's a dad talking. It's hard when you have a road game like we had. We were fortunate. We all know it. You guys that were down there, you guys were lucky as well that the sun wasn't popped out and it was 105 degrees. We all are grateful for that. It was still really humid and it was really hot. It took a lot out of our guys. To ask them to go and practice yesterday was really difficult.
Chris Kleiman on Monday talking about turning around and playing a Friday night game after being on the road at Tulane. Troy Coverdale with you, AJ Shaw on the other side of the glass, opposite of how we sit in the mornings, as Mitch is off to take care of a little of his Manhattan High business for tomorrow night's game, getting ready for their matchup against Lawrence Free State tomorrow evening here on K-Man. Coach talking about that recovery time. And I can't help but think about not just this Friday night, but how this portends for the future with the 12-team playoff. As I sit here and I hear him talking about the quick turnaround and getting guys back to practice right away on Sunday, that's where my thought went. Mm-hmm. Because you're going to be at the whim of the TV schedule.
Yep.
Kind of like what the Cats are for this week's game to begin with. Even though we kind of knew already back in, January, that this was going to be a likelihood that this game would be on a Friday night. Now it's here. And it is an interesting matchup for a number of reasons for the Cats, but one of the things that makes you pause and think about this matchup specifically is the fact that it comes after a Tulane game in which the Cats did not play their best.
Mm-hmm.
And now have to turn around and play against a team that, like them, is nationally ranked.
Yep.
First opportunity at a ranked opponent this season. You get the benefit of being at home as opposed to having to fly to Arizona, which would have been just that much more of a pain in the backside, and would have limited you even further in terms of preparation. So there is that. You at least are at home. You sleep in your own beds, quote unquote. But faced with that short preparation time, what a week to have to put it all together and get ready to go again after a game that you even admit that did not pan out the way that you wanted it to last Saturday.
Well, Coach Schartz for Manhattan High, I know, also made the comment. I mean, they have a short week, too, because to accommodate K-State football. Coming in for that Sunday practice, I'm sure a few of those guys were probably a little not thrilled that they had to do that, having to get up on a Sunday morning and come in and watch the tape and get ready for Arizona, particularly after you fly back from New Orleans late Saturday afternoon, maybe early Saturday evening.
One benefit was it was an 11 o'clock game. That at least helps you out. It was not a night game on Saturday.
That's true.
So it did at least leave you that window.
Yeah, and you didn't have to fly across the country for the most part. I mean, you did have to go down south, but you didn't have to go, from coast to coast, which was helpful. But definitely that is a transition. And I would not be surprised if this team comes out maybe a little slow on Friday, maybe on the first couple of drives. And we've talked about it with K-State throughout the last week. This has been a very slow starting team the first 2 weeks of the season, especially on the offensive side of the ball. Now, unfortunately, last week, the defense also looked very slow to start that game against Tulane. So the key is just who's going to come out faster on Friday. Who's going to come out with that first punch? Who's going to look like they have the most energy? You would think K-State, being at home with the home crowd, would have that. But I would not be surprised if they're a little sluggish maybe out of the start with the short week.
Let me take a look at something here. I am just curious. As the Wildcats have gotten out to their victories, 61-39, 22-10. And as I look at those, unfortunately, I don't have a quarter-by-quarter breakdown. But the key to that is that for all of our talks about where K-State is and slow starts, you especially cannot put yourself in a position where Arizona comes out and has a fast start.
That's true.
And they're going to be wanting to get a fast start given how they performed against Northern Arizona. The fact that they only put 22 up against the Lumberjacks has got them concerned. And you heard Drew Galloway refer to this in the first hour in the conversation as he brought up that they moved the ball well. They just didn't come away with points through the course of that contest. So played a lot between the 20s in the midst of it, as opposed to being able to put NAU away. That is a much closer game than it very likely should have been.
Mm-hmm.
That said, let's see here. Just looking. Only 173 passing yards.
For Noah Fafita?
For Noah Fafita that night.
Mm-hmm.
But he did go 18 of 26.
So he was efficient.
Correct. And they ran the ball for 188 yards. So there is that possibility, again, that they could come out and be looking to take advantage of K-State potentially facing, well, a little bit of tiredness to start this ball game, just because of that difference. Now, I am curious. I know what it took to fly from Tucson to Denver in terms of time. Let's do this. See what the old Google machine tells me in terms of mileage.
Boy.
You are looking at, 17 hours if you were driving it.
They didn't drive it I'm hoping.
No. So let's see. Flight time, just roughly, because you're looking at 934 miles. So it's probably going to be just over 2 hours.
Okay. So not terrible.
2 hours, 23 minutes.
So not terrible.
So not terrible. Exactly. But I've been there. I know how that, so there is that aspect of it coming into town, but they're going to find themselves dealing with that little bit. But again, it could be a lot worse if you're K-State and had you had to go on the road for the matchup this Friday night. That said, still adjusting to the fact, Friday night, 7 o'clock.
Yeah.
It just doesn't sound right.
Well, here's the good news. At least you don't have to go to Provo this week for that game.
Oh, geez.
Yeah, you at least get an extra day of rest before you have to head to that gauntlet of a game. And I say gauntlet because playing in Provo is like getting a root canal for a lot of teams. I happened to be talking with a friend of mine, and he was out there because Southern Illinois was out there a couple of weeks ago. And he said, even though their team's not that good, the atmosphere there is really great, and the fans are – they're crazy about their Cougars. So, it's definitely going to be a challenge. But this Arizona game, for sure, I mean, it's a top 25 matchup in prime time. Can't go wrong with that. It's going to be a real fun game, hopefully.
Well, and again, as we have talked about, one big key here that you want to see K-State take advantage of, it's an opportunity to finish with that 3-0 mark that hasn't taken place under Chris Kleiman in a non-conference.
That's true.
So another item to get to here, actually a couple that I wanted to get into that are a little off of the K-State beat, but there's some familiarity, and there's one of them that, of course, drew everyone's attention on Sunday, and that is the Tyreek Hill situation in Miami. Hill addressed the media today, and I'm going to tip my cap to Tyreek for all of the issues that anybody may have with him and his ego and some different things. One of my issues with how things played out on Sunday when he was pulled over by police was that I felt that he could have handled a little bit of the de-escalation himself. The fact that he rolled his window all the way back up just exacerbated the situation and made it worse. And that's not to say that put him in the position to deserve what the police did to him. The headline today from ABC News: Miami Dolphins wideout Tyreek Hill acknowledging that he could have handled himself better in the initial moments of a weekend traffic stop. Folks, that's a mature player right there. That's
sure.
At least being mature about the situation.
For sure.
He still, however, does want one of the officers involved dismissed from the police force, and I do not blame him one bit for that.
I don't blame him either.
That was a disgusting display of, well, we can do it because.
It was abuse of power. Sorry to interrupt you.
It was. And not only just the physical abuse that they put on him, but also in how his teammates were treated as they tried to get in and help de-escalate things. Mm-hmm. And the entirety of that situation just was messy. And it was uncalled for. It was unnecessary. But someone saw a Maserati and went, ooh, we've got a big one.
Yeah.
And granted, Tyreek shouldn't have been driving 60 in a 40, but
he's Tyreek Hill. He's an NFL player.
Well, okay, there is that too.
Yeah.
A Maserati.
At least he didn't do what Rashee Rice did. That's all I can say.
Oh, okay, all right. The Chiefs, if you remember back to right after the Super Bowl, ESPN came out with a survey. Well, ESPN, I'm not sure who did the survey now that I think about it, but it had to do, here it is. It's the NFLPA report. Did the report cards on teams And the Chiefs released an F in 5 categories. One of the categories was their training staff.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting accusation from a player from another team, Kyle Van Noy. He suffered a fractured orbital bone in the Ravens' loss in Kansas City last Thursday night.
Mm-hmm.
He's slamming the Chiefs' training staff for unprofessional response to the injury. So he goes on his podcast and claims that Kansas City's trainers took an entire quarter before even evaluating him, which thus led to a delay in him being ruled out the remainder of the game. Especially that something could be serious like mine was, you're supposed to rely on the team's training staff or their doctors, and I was supposed to see an ophthalmologist. They took an entire quarter to get down to talk to me in the locker room, which is unacceptable. Van Noy says he doesn't think the lack of urgency from Chiefs trainers stemmed from the fact he's an opposing player. No, rather he just thinks that the franchise as a whole does a poor job of treating injuries.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, it's not relevant. I was thinking of something that I saw several years ago from a Chiefs trainer, but it's not relevant to this conversation. It was a joke that's good sports made. You know who that is, Broncos guy. But yeah, that's a very interesting observation right there from Kyle Van Noy to come out and call out the Chiefs training staff like that.
He did, however, have praise for the emergency room staff at UKMC, KU Med Center, for caring for him after the fact. He says he's still undergoing tests with specialists and has not yet given a timetable for his return. Speaking of injuries, Chiefs injury of note, Hollywood Brown did not practice today.
Yeah.
His shoulder continuing to likely put him in a position where he will not play this weekend. That remains to officially be seen, but for the moment, it does not look good for Hollywood Brown being back on the field, even though Coach Andy Reid keeps saying that he is improving. That's still such a freak injury. First play of the first preseason game for the guy you just bought into.
You figured he'd be back by this week, but I guess it's a lot more serious than we thought. So,
you know, again, it took a while for Tyreek to come back when he suffered it early in the season.
Oh, yeah.
A few years back. So, that said, coming back, we'll wrap things up on this edition of the game. We've got Royals baseball coming up, bottom of the hour, as the Royals take on the Yankees tonight, the finale of that 3-game set here on News Radio KMAN.
I started the Maine Frisbee Golf Club at Cornell.
The game.
This is madness.
News Radio KMAN.
This is the game, News Radio KMAN. AJ and Troy with you here. Mitch had to step out early to head over to Manhattan High to get ready for his game tomorrow against Free State. We'll have that for you at 6. I've told my 9/11 story a little bit. Mitch has. What were you doing the day that 9/11 happened?
Getting ready to go to the office because I was pulling a dayside shift in the newsroom at a cluster of stations in Lincoln and had just gotten shifted to dayside, in fact, and was listening to the sports station that was part of our cluster, and they were reporting, and it was Mike and Mike in the morning, in fact. Kind of appropriate that Golick was on earlier today on the Dan Patrick Show.
Yeah.
And they reported on the first plane hitting and, you know, mentioned how unusual and all of that and went on about what they were talking about. By the time that I got, probably 5 blocks away from the apartment when the second plane hit.
Ooh.
And things began to move quickly in terms of broadcasts. By the time I got into the office, I wound up seated in a studio the bulk of the day, just essentially babysitting because all 4 of our signals were running ABC News the bulk of the day, with a few updates here and there, such as touching on sources, what they were reporting from a local scene and some of that. But it was an odd day just to even be seated in there, and you felt like, well, what am I going to do?
Yeah. It's been a very long day.
Yes, all the way around. Just an exceptionally long day. And just the weirdness of it. When I got home, yeah, I spent the night watching CNN. I mean, pretty much like everybody else did. And just trying to kind of process. Never will forget it, that's for sure.